Welcome back, but actually to a new podcast. First one, Never Bridges Again, NBA. I'm here with the same old guy, Patrick. What's up, man?
Going on. First podcast I've ever done. It's a lie, but yeah, definitely a change up. A lot has gone on since the last time we did one of these, which kind of is why the name has changed, and that's all we'll say about that. So
Yep, we will not even get into that because yeah. But we're starting a little series of pre-training camp, preseason podcasts. Today we got the news recently about Kevin Durant going back to the Nets, so we're gonna go into that, go into the Nets a little bit. First I want to bring up, speaking of slim people, did you see about Chet getting injured?
I did. It's the hope is obviously that it's not going to be something serious that'll keep him out all year, but that kind of injury is not a good sign at this point. I mean, it's just one of those things that'll happen. I don't think it's anything to do with, like, people are talking about his body frame and how he doesn't have enough weight. It has nothing to do with that. It's just an unlucky injury, unfortunately. So I hope for his sake, it's something he can play this year, hopefully. But it's one of those things the Thunder might choose to be take it careful with him and try not to, have a situation where he's playing through injury in his first year in the NBA.
Yep. Um, it is still concerning with his body type though, because he already kind of had a hard time getting 3 pointers. Well, his 3 point shot looks good, but sometimes you would notice the weakness in his legs and stuff, and the fact that he already has a bad foot injury is kind of concerning. It could be a setback because that's the thing with Porzingis, is he was really good, but then just all the injury setbacks just kind of got him out of his game. So you just hate to see that this early on. But hey, it gives the Thunder, if he is out for a while, it gives the Thunder one more year to get another pick, so, or a good pick.
Yeah, I mean, I think the Thunder are actually still in a fine position for this year, just with a lot of the talent they've drafted and stuff. I don't think Chet would have made them, say, a playoff team or something like that. But it is sad for their fans specifically, and also fans like us of basketball, because we're unfortunately might lose the opportunity to watch one of the most talented young players in the league. So, like, I think we're all hoping he recovers well as quickly as he can.
Yeah, why does it always have to happen? Just one rookie is out for a whole year. Ben Simmons, Zion, Embiid was out for
Yeah.
3 years. I don't. Ugh. But yeah. So moving on to KD, I think after y'all signed Aiden and the trades were kind of dying down, I think we both kind of thought he was just gonna be back with the Nets, which looks like is what's gonna be happening. Um, what are your initial thoughts on this?
I mean, it came to the point, like, over the past several weeks, I kind of knew he wasn't going to get traded to the Suns at this point. Um, I should have probably seen it coming from a while ago, because, the first report was that Nets weren't interested in Aiton. And once that was the case, I mean, I just don't think we necessarily had the package they wanted. They wanted more picks than the Jazz got in the Rudy Gobert trade, which we could have done, but, it would have mortgaged our entirety of our future. And they wanted several great young players. We have that with Bridges and Johnson, but then you look at it, you give those two guys up and you get Kevin Durant, but then a lot of your future is also gone and you're trading it for a 34-year-old along with a 37-year-old Chris Paul. So it's obviously, it kind of sucks because, when you have the opportunity to acquire somebody like Kevin Durant, you kind of you get so caught up in the moment. But it makes sense. The other teams that were talked about, Toronto was one. I don't think they wanted to move on from Scotty Barnes, and I don't think a package was realistic without him in it. You're looking at OG, Gary Trent. I guess you could throw Siakam in there if you really wanted to, but I just didn't know about that fit. The real story was heating up was the Boston Celtics and a Jaylen Brown deal, but I don't think they would do Jaylen Brown for Kevin Durant straight up. And then it's a matter of what are you going to throw in that trade? Talk about Marcus Smart, but I don't think Boston necessarily wants to lose that identity they built this year with Smart winning Defensive Player of the Year and Jaylen Brown also having a good year. So they won. The Heat were talked about, but once again, like the Suns, I just don't think they ever had a package to put together. You're looking at Tyler Hero. They couldn't do Bam because of the rookie extension thing with Ben Simmons already on the team. It just became one of those things. The suitors are just not there at the moment. I will say this. I wouldn't rule out something happening at the trade deadline if the Nets aren't clicking, but at the same time, they I do actually like some of the moves they've made this offseason. Royce O'Neal is a good role player, a good defender, which is what they've been lacking. TJ Warren, I'm not exactly sure on his health status, but he's a good scorer off the bench or possibly starting. You still have Ben Simmons. Obviously, it's everything's just a question mark with Ben Simmons. But I mean, they also have great shooting with Patty Mills, Joe Harris, Seth Curry. They still have Kyrie Irving, and I'm assuming he'll be able to play all of this season. And then you have young players like Cam Thomas, Day'Ron Sharpe, Kessler Edwards. So there is optimism there. They have some holes to fill for sure. Mainly their bigs, with only Claxton and Day'Ron Sharpe as their true centers. But there's reason to be optimistic that this team might do well. I think it's really down to the relationship between Kevin Durant, Kyrie Irving, and the front office and the coaching staff. That's really the main factors of this team.
Yeah, because sorry. You mentioned the trade suitors. The trade suitors that there even were, if they did trade for Kevin Durant, they would just have to give up so much. So this just seemed to make sense from both parties, from KD's side and the Nets side. It's probably best for both of them because the Nets, if you were mentioning OG and Gary Trent's, like trying to sell that to fans is kind of rough, giving up KD for them. And like you said, they have a solid roster. Looking at it, probably not as good as I kind of thought. Because, like you said, Royce O'Neal, good pickup because they were seriously lacking wing depth. I mean, the playoffs are just playing four guards at certain points. But I do wonder about the 3-point aspect because you mentioned Joe Harris and you have Patty Mills and Seth Curry. At the deadline, like you were saying, I just feel like they're going to have to kind of shuffle things around because I was looking into it, and interestingly, they were 28th in three-pointers attempted this past year, 24th in three-pointers made, 10th in percentage, so they were making them at a high clip, but it is interesting to think, of course, it's important to have spacing for those ISO guys to do their thing, but shooting isn't a huge priority on the perimeter for their offense. So I feel like shuffling one of those great spacers for another defender or something like that, we're going to see that.
Yeah, I mean, I think the move has to be for a big man. I think Claxton
and they reported that they were looking for one right now too.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think one you could look at is Miles Turner is always in the news. That's kind of a fit that makes a lot of sense. But there's other guys available, and they also, like you said, they do have young players. A package of like Day'Ron Sharpe and I don't know. I mean, I guess Joe Harris. It's kind of a contract thing. Who are you going to trade? Joe Harris, Seth Curry. You could trade Patty Mills, but given his age and his veteran kind of status, I doubt he would be moved.
But Ben Simmons is an X factor. He's already a big X factor as it is, but he is an X factor with what I was just talking about, though, with the 3-pointers. Maybe if he does pan out in a really big way, they do want to just keep all the spacing so they could have a bunch of flexibility because there's always injuries. So if Ben Simmons works out like they want, maybe they cater their play style to him.
It is a possibility. I mean, there also is the possibility that Ben Simmons is going to be their center. Because he has the size to be their center. It's just one of those things, the ball handling aspect. Most people assume he's either kind of a 1 or he's a 4. There's no real. He's just a flexible player, but there's easily a world where you see him at the 5, Durant at the 4, and then Joe Harris or Royce O'Neal at the 3, and then Seth Curry and Kyrie Irving. I mean, they have
Ooh,
plenty
that
of
sounds like a good
options.
lineup right there.
It does. I mean, the worry is physicality and rebounding, which is why I think you'd see Royce O'Neal in that lineup instead of like a Joe Harris, or you see Joe Harris at the 2 instead of Seth Curry. I mean, they have options, especially at the 1, 2, and the 3. It's kind of just the 4 and the 5. You know, either Durant's obviously the 4. Talked about Kessler Edwards, TJ Warren. You know, TJ Warren's an interesting piece. They have plenty of scoring. Just a matter of where the defense is going to come from besides, you know, your Ben Simmons, Claxton, Royce O'Neal, maybe Kessler Edwards. You know, he's still got some ways to go as well on the defensive end. But you
Wait,
know, it's not a bad team. It's not a bad team at all. You know, it's a team that last year was ravished by injuries and the whole Kyrie situation and the whole James Harden situation. So maybe they'll be more fluid as a team. It's kind of hard to think that just given how this offseason's gone for them. But they could put it together. You know, I don't think Kyrie and Kevin Durant's relationship is necessarily fractured. It's more a front
nah, it
office
seems
thing.
all right.
So I think it's one of those things at the deadline. If they're contending, I think Kevin Durant and Kyrie are going to say, let's go get a piece to join us instead of them saying, all right, we're going to jump. So it's a possibility it could work. I mean, it was just one of those things after a few weeks after the whole he requested a trade Kevin Durant and nothing really was happening. I think people started to realize that it was kind of unlikely at the time. I mean, it's just a tough thing to do with a lot of people who can't be traded because they were free agents and just signed a new deal. There's a lot of moving parts, so I think it's on hold for now, obviously, and then it's kind of a wait and see how the Nets play this year, and that'll determine whether he gets moved in season or we'll wait until next off season for more rumors.
Well, yeah, and then there's still the issue with Steve Nash too, because you were mentioning the strain with the staff relationships, and then obviously KD said he wants Sean Marks and Steve Nash out, but it's like there was also that thing with Cam Thomas at Summer League at the mention of Steve Nash. He had like a real passive aggressive look, so it it doesn't look too promising. And you were mentioning how they were health the injuries were ravaging them. Well, Katie and Kyrie have not been reliable the past few years, so with those two as big question marks, it's pretty concerning. But like you said, they're still good. I still have them as a contender. They could easily rack up regular season wins. Where do you put them in the East?
It's that's a tough thing. You know, I've been saying now for a while that the Bucks are the best team in basketball. I think I'd put the Bucks. I think I'd put the Celtics over them.
Yeah,
Everybody else is kind of a question mark. You know, the Heat. Obviously, I've really liked the Heat. So, but the Nets. I mean, there's an argument for the Nets and the Heat to be close. There's an argument for the Sixers and the Heat.
yeah.
You know, there's a lot riding on James Harden and whether his offseason is going well and whether he's going to be able to return to his old form. Because if he does, then I would like the Sixers more. But there's just question marks there. You never know with Joel Embiid and his health. The only two teams I would say I'd put definitely above them are the Celtics and the Bucks, and then everybody else is kind of a wait and see. You know, it's very similar situations: Bulls and injuries, Sixers and injuries, the Heat, and I don't even assume they say
The
injuries.
Sixers
Sixers,
have good depth this year, though, so I still
yeah.
but I believe I'm pretty firm that they'll be three because well, standing wise, I would probably put Celtics one because they were just so dominant to close out the regular season and they're way deeper now. I just think the Bucks, they have to wait for Joe Ingles to come back, and the reason I agree with you, like in a series perspective, I put the Bucks above everyone, but just in terms of regular season wins, I think
Oh
the
yeah,
Celtics and maybe even the Sixers could have more because I just think the
I
Sixers are built for the regular season.
well, that's the thing is yeah, that is true now that you mention it because realistically, if I'm looking at a record, I honestly might pick the Heat over the Bucks just in terms of who's going to have a regular season record because I think the Heat are a little bit
Interesting.
deeper than the Bucks. I mean, obviously the Bucks are a better team. But it's just one of those things. The Heat have a little bit more depth. So
And that's what I
yeah,
wonder with the Nets too. Is I feel like if they're healthy throughout the regular season stuff, they could easily be in the race for the top 3 seeds,
I
even
think
if
for
I'm
sure.
concerned about a lot of aspects of their team.
I think for sure if they stay relatively healthy, they're going to be a playoff team, not a play-in team. I mean, I think they're easily going to do that.
Easily, yeah.
It's just a matter of, there's a lot of questions because, I mean, you could also look at Toronto. I mean, they've lost nobody and they've added a few pieces. So Toronto could easily take a step up from 48 wins a year ago, too. I mean,
Yeah, that's true.
there's a lot of competitive teams in the East. So won't be easy for the Nets, but I mean they have the talent. It's just a matter of whether the chemistry is there, and we'll be able to tell early on how much they've recovered from the whole offseason rumors and stuff.
And then, like you were saying earlier, it's impossible to tell if things go south, if KD will eventually get traded, and if that means Kyrie and Ben Simmons would also be out the deadline. So it's really hard to say. It definitely the Bucks, Celtics, Sixers just feel like my firm. Like, yeah, I'm confident in them. The Heat are definitely up there. It's just I do have concerns with them, but I guess we can get into that later. I just wanted to bring it up because I went with the context of now we have to view them as a contender because we thought their season was a sham, but nope, now they're competing.
Yep.
So that's cool. And now that brings us to our second little segment of the day. I'll lay the groundwork here. We're going to be ranking players entering this season, but we're doing it in a draft format. Patrick, you're going to end up having the first pick, and then I'll go second, and then you be third. Da 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 da. So we're just kind of doing this to. This could be a little time capsule because we could always look back on our podcast from last year, and then, a year from now we look back on this and go like, okay, this is what we thought of the rankings. So this will be, since it's a draft format, this will kind of be our joint list. We will have opinions that differ. We'll probably go into that on some of the picks, but some of the picks we'll probably just agree. And then we set the rule that this is assuming they're coming into the season full health, but also assuming that previous health problems could creep up. All types of factors are going into it. It's definitely not a perfect list. There's all types of standards we went by, personal biases, stats, how
Definitely.
much we like people. But I would say our top 10 will probably shake out how you would expect, but maybe it'll start looking different as we go. But yeah, so you want to get us started with the first pick?
Okay. First pick for me was pretty easy. I'm gonna go with Giannis. I think it's just. I mean, I think he's obviously a superstar. He carried his team to a championship just over a year ago. I think he likely would have done so this year without the Chris Middleton injury. I think he's durable. I mean, he's just a freak. He's a freak, and he's on, like I said, I think the best team in basketball. So I'm going with Giannis.
No arguments. I thought the same thing. And with my pick number 2, Jokic, you probably are actually is that who you would pick for number 2?
It is, yes.
Okay. Yeah, my case is obvious. These are the two first picks are the past 4 MVPs. I mean, Jokic, just like Giannis, just dominates the game at such a high level in every aspect, and just the demigods of basketball right now.
Absolutely. And also, I mentioned it with Giannis durability. Jokic is also very durable as well.
Yep.
That played a big part in my decision.
Yep, that's an underrated aspect of Jokic for sure.
So my third one, this one was a little bit more complicated because I had a few names that I considered, but considering what happened this year, I'm going to have to go with Steph Curry. I think, the championship this year, he was by far the best player on that team as well. Andrew Wiggins was their second best player, which is no slight to Andrew Wiggins at all. But, this was much more of a harder job than the earlier championships for Curry. He had a great year. I mean, he's aging so perfectly right now. I mean, the way he runs an offense is incredible. His shooting's always going to be there. He also is getting his teammates involved. There are others that I'm sure we'll be discussing in the next couple of names, but I just thought that Steph Curry, given this past year, he's deserves to be third on this list.
We are 100% lockstep because I had the exact same pick and explanation. With the fourth pick, Luca, because I mean he's just incredible. One man army, supernova, nuclear scorer, and just laughs it off like he's playing a kid's game or something. It's crazy. I know you're kind of hating him right now, but I'm a stan. I'm sorry.
So it's the first time, if I'm correct, that we've actually disagreed because Luca is not my number 4 player.
Oh, okay.
Once we get a few more picks in, I'll explain where I had him at. It's not that far down, and believe me, it's not that far down. But my number 4 player, and that means my pick at number 5 is going to be Kevin Durant.
Okay.
And this was one of those ones. Durability is definitely a thing. I mean, I think Luka is a little bit more durable than Durant at this point in his career, but I still think Durant is the best scorer in basketball. I think he's an underrated defender. I think he had a lot of things he had to deal with this year. I don't think he was fully healthy
And
the whole
still put up
year.
30 a game.
Yeah. I mean, he's another guy. He's aging. It's just crazy seeing the amount of players in their mid 30s now who are still best players in the league. I just feel like Kevin Durant is still just a little bit better than Luka. It's one of those things. I think in a one game environment, it could go either way because, I mean, as we all know, Luka can just absolutely go off, just as Kevin Durant can. Over a season, I think I'd take Durant over Luka. That's just my opinion. I think Luka obviously has the passing edge, but I think Durant is a better defender, and that's as we'll get when we get later in this list. You'll notice a lot of my picks are based on defense because I value defense very highly personally. So that's why I went with Kevin Durant.
No, yeah, it's definitely a good argument because you take away because Luca, he's dang near negative on defense. Kevin Durant's like really good. I don't know what some people are like he's not. I'm like okay. Um, he, but I definitely like he still has playmaking though. Um,
Yes.
so his passing isn't like a ridiculous fall off from Luca, but Luca's passing is pretty goddamn insane though.
Yeah, for sure.
Um, so that means I am the sixth pick, and I'm going to pick Kawhi because
Wow.
yeah, I know he's been dealing with injuries and stuff, but since we made the rule that we're assuming they're 100% like at their peak, just what he did last year against Dallas. Just every time I see him in the playoffs, he's doing amazing things. But I seriously have not seen such dominant games where a guy was so locked in before. And yeah, you got to deal with the silence and the resting him and all that. But I just like, I want that guy on my team when I'm trying to win at the highest level. He's a nightmare for everyone, the perfect role model for 3 and D, but then expanded his game to such a high level. I just love Kawhi, so the bias was definitely a part of this. How high he was for me.
Yeah, it's one of because I'm a big fan of Kawhi Leonard too, so I completely get it. It's just one of those things. I mean, if he was fully healthy, arguably I'd have him higher than where you picked him. I mean, he's that good when he's on and fully healthy, and obviously, like we said, they're starting fully healthy. I just don't have any faith in his ability to stay healthy. Unfortunately, if I see it, it's going to be great, but it's just one of those things, and that's why he's actually a good ways down my list. As hard as it may be to believe, but he was not even in the realm of my ideas right now. So
Well, mark it up,
it's
people.
very
Number six is it is a hot topic, hot button issue. Number
yeah.
six.
So talked about Luca. I had Luca as my number 6 player, and as we know, Kawhi was not there, so that means I actually get to pick my number 5 player, and that's going to be Joel Embiid.
Oh,
And So this is a guy who had an incredible year this year. I mean, he's had an incredible several years in a row. A big thing early in his career was his durability. Like as you might be able to tell, there's a bit of a reoccurring theme. Durability and defense is very important to me.
Mm-hmm.
Really, these past couple of years, he's actually been relatively durable. He does get hurt, but at the same time, he plays through a lot of injuries. And obviously, this is something that's probably going to catch up to him later in his career, which is unfortunate. But I mean, he might be the most physically dominant. I mean, probably Giannis, but after Giannis, he's probably the most physically dominant player in the league. You you're looking at a guy who,
Absolutely, and he does some Giannis stuff himself because he's been getting a lot better in the fast break, handling the ball, which is just unbelievable to see from a back down dominant 7 foot whatever center.
yeah, I mean, he's obviously the biggest player in the NBA just because 7'2", 250, 260, 270 pounds. He can post up, he can shoot the ball amazingly, he can ball handle. He's getting better, when he gets double teamed.
He
And the
draws a
main
million
thing,
fouls a game.
yes, that is true, and he knocks down free throws while he's at it. And the main thing as well is that he's a very, very good defender, a great rim protector. You saw it. He can neutralize other players. You saw in the Heat series, Bam Adebayo was mostly neutralized on the offensive end because of the defense of Joel Embiid. So I mean, he's a guy who, if Jokic wasn't in the league, he would have won MVP this past year. So I mean, he's a very, very talented player, and I think he's deserving at this, especially at number 7. He's definitely deserving.
Oh man, you're kind of making me feel bad about picking Kawhi over him, but what's done is done. Very good case though. My number eight's probably the same as you, and that is LeBron James, the
Yep.
newest multiverses hero. um, but I mean, he's getting older, but you wouldn't know it from watching him because he was still incredible last year when he played center. That was pretty insane, dropping 30 points. His team was just rat, and that was partly his fault for his lead GMing, but that don't take away from the player he is. We all know it's LeBron. It's just he's a little lower because he is a bit older and just doesn't have that same crazy impact like the guys we mentioned before, especially on defense, which is what you were looking for.
Yeah, I have no complaints. He's number 7 on my list because, like you said, the Kawhi thing, which I'll bring it up when we get to him. But yeah, no complaints there. He's obviously aging. At this point, he really is aging because I mean he's 37 or 38 years old. I don't know the exact mark, but I mean he's still an incredible player.
37. Yep.
So now this is where it starts getting interesting for me. Um,
Well, I do
so
have to say 12 is where it started to get hard for me, but you go ahead.
yeah, it's just like this next batch of players are already close, and there was some bias involved in it. I
So does that
didn't
mean
get
Devin Booker is ninth?
uh this is the ninth pick, but no, I'm not picking Devin Booker in here. But sorry, Devin Booker here. I'm gonna go with Jason Tatum.
Ooh, okay.
So I think, I tried to calculate as well, when we were talking about Steph Curry earlier, the past season also. And I mean, Jason Tatum had the start of the year was a little bit questionable, but the Boston Celtics had an incredible second half of the year and an incredible playoffs. And, Jason Tatum was at the helm of that. And he's been very durable. He's obviously a great scorer. I saw in the playoffs at least his passing was really improving as well. I think it improved during the regular season too. I think he's trying to get his teammates more involved. He's not just an ISO guy. And the main thing that lands him above Devin Booker and a few of the other guys in this list is his defense. His defense is really, really good. You saw a lot
Yeah,
of it in the net
and just the fact
series.
that he's a wing is
Yeah,
also why he was higher for me too.
Yeah, so I mean, it was tough because some of these names, which we'll be picking in the next couple of picks, are also very good. But I'm just giving him the edge because of him taking the Celtics to the finals, and also his defensive improvements over the past year for sure.
Yeah, so I actually had him 10. So
Okay.
I was one off. So I'll go with my ninth on my list for the 10th pick, Jimmy Butler.
Ah, yep.
Um, what, same for you?
No. Oh well. Technically, yes, he is 10th. I have somebody else who hasn't been picked
Oh,
above him,
okay.
but yes, he's in that range. He was one of those guys. And this, there's four guys, or I guess five if you include one other guy, that are in this kind of range right here, and it was tough to rank the five of them. So
Yeah, so first thing, uh, there is like the injury concern because he seems to be dealing with stuff frequently, but he still is only 32. And maybe he isn't always there for you in the regular season, but if we're just counting playoffs exclusively, he would probably be top five because every time in the playoffs the past few years, it's just been insane how crazy good he is getting to the basket whenever he wants, drawing fouls. He's just so crafty in every aspect. And then he never shoots, but in the playoffs, he'll start splashing threes. I mean, that 48-minute game, game seven against the Celtics, every second played. Like, the guy is just a freaking baller. He's amazing, dude. I just think he's worthy of being in our top 10. He has to be.
I 100% agree. You talk about the injuries, but I think he plays through. He's tough. I mean, really, he's just a dog. He is
He's a
so
dog.
tough. And like you said, in the postseason, his scoring goes from great in the regular season to an incredible level in the postseason. So I have zero complaints about him being in the top 10 because he was in my top 10 as well. So no complaints from me.
So with the 11th pick, that who's that?
That's going to be Devin Booker,
Mm,
which is debatable. There are some big names specifically that are behind him. And this is where my bias shows, obviously, but he was the best player on the best regular season. Unfortunately, I'd like to say best team in the league, but best regular season team, arguably over the past 2 years. Runs a great offense. His playmaking has improved over the years. It's at a very good level right now. Obviously, playing with Chris Paul helps that. Scoring continues to improve. He's very, very durable. He plays most of the games. This year, most of the games he missed were due to COVID, which is unfortunate. He did have the thing in the first series against the Pelicans. Just to be clear on that, but I don't think that's really a knock on him. And he came back early and helped eliminate the Pelicans. The main reason why he's moved up, because probably if you asked me last year, I'd have him more in like around the 20 to 25 range. Main reason is he took big steps defensively this year. He looked like a completely different player. He's taking on harder assignments,
the pull
and
up
he's proven.
threes, he's gotten really good at.
Yep, and that's also a big thing as well. His 3-point percentage this year took a massive jump. He looked much more confident from behind the arc the year before. He was almost exclusively mid range. Now he's really starting to get that 3-point stroke back, and he can score at all three levels. Even his finishing at the rim has gotten better. So obviously there's bias involved in this just a little bit, which puts him above the two guys that are in this range, like I've been talking about. But I gotta take Booker here.
No, I'm with you with the ranges thing because we are in a certain tier right now. There's definitely certain drop offs, but it probably happened with once we got out of the top 10. It was the same thing as our last two picks. I had Booker 12th, who I had 11th. I'll be picking 12th, which is Ja Morant, which honestly, as great as Ja is, I could totally see you making a case for Booker over him. It's just the fact that he can just randomly explode for 40 through sheer just forcing his way to the basket as like a 6 foot guard. And then there's obviously the flashiness and this he's from South Carolina. We all love Ja, so
Oh yeah.
that was the only reason I have him above Booker. But no, I just say that to say your bias isn't too bad. Like I still had Booker in my top 12 as well. He's been that good the past couple of years. So
Yep. No complaints for me. Job was my number 11, just behind Butler and Booker. So no complaints for me on that. I mean, it was more so, just the shooting aspect for Booker. I think the defense is better, and then also the durability. I
Yeah.
mean, there you can make a case that Ja is better at every single other aspect than that. It's just, like I said, and bias. Like I said, bias plays a part. But I just had to give it to Booker. But there's no, I mean, we're cutting hairs here. Ja Morant is an incredible player and will continue to get better. I just hope he stays healthy. I think that's the hope of everybody.
Yeah, for sure.
So my number 12 player is Kawhi Leonard. So that's just I wanted to let y'all know about that. So he
Oh
is
shoot.
behind. So I had Booker at 9, Butler at 10, Ja at 11, and Kawhi at 12. We
Okay.
talked about Kawhi earlier. The injuries are just the reason he's here. So the next player I'm going to pick, also injuries played a little bit of a part in it, but he's a guy who was pretty durable before that, and that's going to be Damian Lillard. And this is where I think it's, you talked about after 12, it starts getting interesting to me. I agree. There's some interesting players in this range. I just went with Lillard because, I mean, offensively, we all know how good he is. He can, take off at any time. You think about that series against the Nuggets in the playoffs the previous year. I mean, just incredible the scoring punch he has. His team performance is unfortunately not down to him. It's just they can't seem to build a team around him, which is unfortunate. One of the most loyal players in basketball. Offensively, he's obviously the scoring, but he also gets his teammates involved. Not to the level of say a Luka or somebody like that, but I think at this point in the draft, his scoring is just going to put him on this list.
No complaints either. He was a little lower, 15 for me, but I love Dame, so I can't dispute it. Who I had at 13, who I'll be picking up 14, is Paul George. Mostly he I know Dame waved him off and all that, but it's the same thing with Tatum. I just value the big wings that could do it all. And Paul George, that playoff run he had last year was just blew me away. I was like, okay, he's back. He's not Pandemic P anymore. He that looks like the dude that I really liked on the Pacers and the Thunder. It's just I didn't like him for a bit when he first got to the Clippers, but yeah, nah, I still think he's a top 15 player. Where'd you have him?
I had him at 14, right where you picked him.
Oh,
So he was
nice.
my next pick for sure. Same reasons as he listed. He would have been above Lillard, I guess, above Kawhi. He would have been a couple picks higher if not the injury concerns. But I mean, when he does play, he's more durable than Kawhi, and we talk about his jump shot all the time. It's just so
It's
pure.
so pure.
Yeah. So absolutely no complaints for me. So at this pick, you're not going to like this. And to be honest, I don't really like it either. But I kind of have to go with Trae Young.
Bro, he was my 14th.
Oh, it's
Make the
it's tough.
case because you're gonna say what I'm thinking.
I mean, okay, I don't want to sound like a Trae Young hater because okay, I'm gonna say you are a bit of a Trae Young hater. I got to be
Uh,
honest. I mean, it's just one of those things. I don't particularly love the guy because, first of all, he plays absolutely no defense. It's just one of those things. He gets his teammates involved very well. I think if I'm right, he led the league in assists this past year. I'm not sure on that,
it
but
was almost 10, so it was up there.
yeah. And I mean, he scores at an incredible rate. So it's just one of those things. He kind of
It's just undeniable, man. I mean, to be that explosive as an offensive play. That's why I had him one spot above Dame on my list, and that was partly because Dame was kind of he was dealing with a bad injury last year, but I just feel like okay, they're both guards that don't play defense, but I feel like Trey is just just a bomb on offense, and Dame is too, but Dame doesn't necessarily put up those same assist numbers.
That's true. I just valued the Dame.
Yeah, the
They,
leadership and everything.
the leadership. I mean, you look at the Hawks. Him and John Collins have been apparently there's issues between them.
Yeah.
It was tough. I mean, really, when you look at them, they're not that far. But I also think Dame is a better defender when he wants to be. I think Trae Young can want to be a good defender and he'll
No,
still be
that's true.
terrible.
That's
So,
true.
but and this is not me trying to hate on Trey in any way. I'm not a huge fan of his play style, but I mean he deserves to be at 15. I think that's fair.
I do too. Uh this might be one of our first controversial ones. He was 16 on my list. He's going to be 16 in our draft. Zion. I just, I know there's not much of a body of work, but just when we saw it, it was too insane. It just was the way he could get to the basket and finish every single time. No one knows how to stop him. If we could get 50, 60 games, I just can't justify like like for example, Chris Paul's in this range for me, but it's just like, would I rather have Zion or 38-year-old Chris Paul? That's kind of what I was thinking with that.
Yeah, I have him a fair bit lower.
Oh, see, I knew this was going to be a hot button issue.
Not too bad, but he is. We're gonna have to take a couple picks before we see him on my list.
Okay.
It's just like I said, I just value durability and defense so highly, and
Yeah.
he just doesn't really check either of those boxes for me, and that's why I love the guy. South Carolina, we talked about it with Ja.
Yeah.
Um.
So 6 and 16. That's every 10 picks. It's controversial.
So this one is going to be really, really controversial because this is another player you hate. Not sure if you probably know who I'm talking about. I'm going with Kyrie.
Oh, he wasn't even in my top 30.
Wow.
Kyrie, okay, go.
When he plays offensively, I mean, he's probably I want to say the best ISO scorer. He's one of the hardest to guard ISO scorers in the league. I mean, the best handle in the league by far. He gets his teammates involved. The defense is whatever, but he's not terrible. I mean, he's better than Trae Young. It's the off the court stuff that obviously is why he's not on your list. I think it's fair to say without the off the court stuff, he'd be in your top 30.
I know we said like, okay, we're just picking the players, but yeah, I mean, just that, and then when he did play, he just wasn't that amazing anymore, and just an undersized guy. And I just look at some of the other players I had in my top 30. I'm just like, well, what they've given me the past year or two, I would just rather have. But yeah,
it's a completely fair argument. I just look at some of the names and I'm like, if I had a playoff series, it's tough. It's like I said, this whole range is just really tough. But
it is a tough range, and I definitely see what you're saying.
So Kyrie is my pick there.
Okay, number 18 is my number 18 on my list. Again, Chris Paul.
Okay.
Or actually, I'm sorry, I messed that up because I realized 17 I had someone else, but the Kyrie thing completely blew me up, man. I actually had Donovan Mitchell one ahead of Chris Paul, so we'll pick him 18th there. I probably just one play. Chris Paul's so good and everything, but I just like how Donovan Mitchell's younger. He has shown up in the playoffs and given really explosive performances. And even though he's short, that wingspan, if he would just try on defense, but it is pretty pitiful. So I could see that going either way. What do you think?
I had Mitchell at that pick specifically. Well, not
18?
Well, not good. Well, he was 17 on my board because Zion is back, but he was my next player available, so no complaints.
So we both have Mitchell 17 on our actual boards. Okay. Interesting.
Yep. So no complaints for me. I do think at this point in his career, he's just he's just a tad better than CP3. Doesn't have the playmaking, but the scoring. Obviously, he can carry the load.
That burst to the rim, man.
Oh yeah, I mean his first step is so good. I mean he's physical. He's like a bowling ball. He can shoot the lights out, especially once he gets going. The defense, like you said, isn't best, but it's not terrible. It really isn't terrible. And I also think if he had competent defenders around him, I think he would also look better. We've been talking about the Jazz perimeter defense for years now, so he's one of the best young players in basketball, and I think also his situation, if he was in a better situation, he could be higher on this list. I mean, we talked about the Booker and Mitchell debates back in the years. Booker's now benefiting from the good team I think Mitchell could also benefit from somebody like Mikal Bridges next to him. So
Yeah.
but no complaints for me on that one.
Okay.
So might surprise you here. In fact, it probably definitely will. Chris Paul is not the pick here.
Okay.
He's my next pick, which I assume means you're going to take him. I'm
Everything's
going.
balanced as it should be.
I'm going DeMar DeRozan here.
Ooh.
Now this one is. It's just one of those things. I was talking about the past year played a big thing. I
Yeah.
do think recent performance plays a part. He had a great year, and probably one of the best situations of his career. Obviously those Raptors teams he was on were good, but this Bulls team is fun to watch, and has a good facilitator with Lonzo Ball when he's healthy, a good secondary scorer with Zach LaVine, another good scorer in Vucevic. DeRozan was in a good situation this year, and it's just one of the fact is that he can't be stopped from mid range. I mean, it's just one of those things. It's just automatic. Post game is great. His defense is. I shouldn't say it's bad. It's not good, but it's not bad. It's average, which is
Yeah.
better than a lot of the names on this list, to be honest. I mean, he carried the load for the Bulls this year. Through all the injuries, he was pretty much available the whole year. The playoff series, he tried his best. It was just, uphill battle
Injuries
against the.
destroyed them. But yeah, throughout the year, the stuff he was doing was amazing. Like I
Yeah,
did have him a little lower. I had him at 27, which it feels like I should have had him higher considering I am a big fan of him. And then what you were talking about the year he just had.
yeah,
It's just there was just some people I like better. That's all.
yeah. It's completely fair. If you're just talking about the Chris Paul debate, simply put him over in durability and defense. And I know that's like, oh, Chris Paul's 12-time All Defensive Player, but Chris Paul is not that defender anymore. If
No.
coming from me, somebody who watches almost every Suns game, Chris Paul is not that defensive player anymore. DeRozan is a better defender at this point in his career.
So that means with 20, it is Chris Paul. How do you feel about that? Does that feel right to you?
Yeah, it feels right. I mean, last year, it's fourth in the MVP voting, if I remember right. He's obviously not the fourth best player in the league. I think that's fair. I think last year a lot of people were talking about him as like in the 10 range where Booker is, and I think this past year you saw Booker took the team over and Chris took kind of a secondary role. Basically, I think they kind of switched around. I think it's perfectly fair. I think you could argue him above Kyrie, above maybe Mitchell, him above
I just
DeRozan.
think like some of those games me and you were watching the highlights of in the playoffs, just the fact that he went perfect from the field with jump shots and stuff. I was like, I don't know. I know he's getting older, but I just have to have him in my top 20 because before the collapse, he was playing out of his mind.
Yeah,
And
for
like we were
sure.
talking about throughout the year, how healthy he stayed throughout the year with his age. I know this for entering next season, but obviously we've been using last season as a frame of reference here. So
No, nothing wrong with that. He was my 19th guy, and I think we're both in agreement. He's top 20 player in this league. In the leadership as well. Don't forget that.
yeah.
I mean, probably the best leader in basketball. A winner. I know he hasn't won a championship. People will say, but I mean, he's a winner as far as I'm concerned.
So he's 21 then.
For me, it's my number 20 player, and talent wise, the next guy on my list is better, but I got to go with Pascal Siakam here.
Ooh. I like.
He's more durable than the next guy on my list. That's an understatement. You probably know who I'm talking about at this point, but anyways, Siakam, he had probably his best year this past year. He really, he had great players around him, obviously, but he's the main scorer on that Raptors team. Facilitating wise, he had a really good year as well. With the Raptors, kind of everybody plays point kind of role. Everybody's a ball handler. They're just. I mean, we could talk about the Raptors for a whole podcast. The way they play basketball, it's so incredible. But he had a great year. I mean, he's just a perfect NBA 4, small ball 5, even plays some 3 at time. I just think his past year really puts him in this discussion. And he's been good for several years. So But I mean, he's young enough still. He's durable. He plays most games. He always gives you points. He always gives you effort and that kind of stuff. I think he's deserving at this range.
It's funny because it's just like DeRozan, where I had him 24, and I feel like now that you make the case, I might have should have put him higher. But yeah, so that would leave. So I have to go back to after Chris Paul on my list. So 19 on my
Ooh.
list and 22 in our draft is going to be Anthony Edwards. And
Ooh.
maybe I'm buying into the Kermit. What was it? Kermit Wiltz?
Kermit. Oh yeah, I think so. I think so.
Yeah, I'm buying
It was
into the
Kermit. It was
Kermit
Kermit
hype.
for sure.
Um, I know he's just going into his third year now, and he doesn't have his whole polished prime game yet, but just the threat that he gives you going to the basket is up there with Zion and LeBron, and his shot's already so good, and he's a willing learner and willing to do more playmaking based off of interviews I've seen, based off of how you saw he progressed through the year. I just think that amount of explosiveness, athleticism, shot making, personality, all of that just contributes to where he ranked on my list.
Oh, so this might come as a surprise to you. He's actually not in my top 30.
Okay. 16, now 22.
Yeah.
Well,
Now
16,
he's
17, and 22.
he's not far off. He was one of the names, and looking at it now, there's a name or two where I could easily make a case for him being above them. He's not. I actually thought you were going to take my pick here, and it's not necessarily one I really want to make. But when you said Anthony, thought you were going to say Anthony Davis, and that is the next guy on my list.
Ooh.
I think it's fair to say that if we had a guarantee he'd be fully healthy for the year, he would be much higher on this list. But that is literally he is the most injury prone player in basketball, even above Kawhi Leonard, I'd say at this point. And there are also concerns in his game too that made me drop it. The past
Yeah.
couple of years he's been trying to be too much of a jump shooter instead of using his physicality. That being said, he's not a bad jump shooter. In the post, he can still dominate, and he's one of the best defensive big men in basketball. I mean, he's
Well, the thing is, he is a bad jump shooter now, or the past couple
true.
of years at least. Because I mean, last year when he was healthy, he shot like what 18% from three. Like,
That is
sheesh.
true. I mean, I'm talking more about his mid range because
Yeah,
personally, if I was his coach, I would tell him, you better not shoot a single three,
I
to be
even think
honest.
his mid range started to fall off, but I don't have the numbers in front of me though.
Yeah, it is true. This past year was concerning, obviously, injuries again,
Yep.
but even when he was supposedly healthy, he didn't look like it. And that's just every year it just seems to be taking a toll on him. But with that being said, his track record and his talent still puts him in this list for me.
Yeah, that's why I still have him at 28 on my list, so he's in my top 30 because all of that's undeniable. He just got penalized for so many different things. But
Yeah.
yeah, he would be higher if things were going differently. And maybe he will redeem himself this year. That's always possible. So number 24, who was number 20 on my list, Cat.
Huh.
Um, I know there's issues there. He doesn't always bring it mentally or on defense, but he's definitely gotten better at defense, and I just think the offensive package for a big man is so important, especially because you always talk about, not you specifically, but everyone always talks about like, oh, stretch five, this stretch. There aren't that many stretch fives, and he's not just a stretch five. He's one of the best shooters in the NBA. So I just value that a lot.
Yeah, no real complaints for me. I think at this range, it's kind of a matter of who you prefer, their style of
Yeah.
basketball. And he is in my top 30. He's the last player in my top 30.
Okay.
So not too far off, but I mean, you're right. Obviously, I mean, he's one of the best shooters in basketball, and considering he's a five, is incredible. I mean, and we'll see this year because his ability to play with Rudy Gobert, who might be in this list, might not be. Also, So, he's probably going to be playing a bit more forward this year, but talent wise, I mean, he's so talented. He's such a great shooter. He could still post up very well too. Don't think just because he's on the perimeter he can't body someone down in the post. He still can.
Oh, I've
And like you
watched
said,
Hornets Timberwolves games.
and rebounding, he's a good rebounder.
Yep.
Defensively, that's really been the question mark. And like you said, I did see improvements this year. So there's no complaints from me in the top 30. Now, my pick, um, just for reference, we already passed Zion was 22 on my list. So the next player on my list that's available and is completely the opposite of Towns in my book, and that's going to be Bam Adebayo. And
Oh, dude, he was 25 on my board. Now he's 25 on our draft.
I mean, the main reason I say is the opposite is just because defensively he is incredible. Incredible what he does on the defensive end. He's a rim protector. He's a great perimeter defender. He can switch onto anything. Offensively, it's kind of one of those things when I watch him, I'm like, I don't really see this dude being a good scorer, but he scores points and he does it in an efficient way. A lot of it is energy, rebounding, putbacks, that kind of stuff. He has an acceptable jump shot. He can post up on smaller centers or smaller players. And also he's improved that he's a pretty solid ball handler. He brings the ball up the court sometimes. He can play on the perimeter if need to. His passing isn't bad. Just his overall energy and defense. Also, durability. He plays a good bit of games as well. I just think at this range, really it's his defense that gets him at this range. Like I said, I think it's one of those things, he should always be a defensive player of the year candidate, especially the way he played this past year.
Agreed. And speaking of defense, number 26, this might actually surprise you because he was number 21 on my board. But I went with Drew Holiday because what he does on defense as a guard is just pretty incredible. The way he disrupts other guards. I mean, we saw it in the Suns Bucks finals. And then he does have weird cold spells on offense, but I just love how much he's improved as a playmaker with the Bucks and the fact that like Jalen Brunson, he's a guard who could post up, so he gives you multiple looks. He could shoot. He does everything you want. Seems like a great locker room guy. I just had to have him in my top 30 because I value what he does everywhere so much.
Yeah, I can't necessarily complain with that at all. He's not in my top 30, but I mean, his impact on the game, arguably it should be.
He's one of those where it's not like a super flashy player, but then when you're looking at all the important games, you're like, holy crap, I could really use Drew Holiday right now.
It is. I mean, it really, because I talked about how my defensive durability plays a big part. Realistically, he's somebody I probably overlooked a little bit then, because I mean, he's obviously he's in my fringe top 30, but I mean, defense, he is literally the epitome of that. He is, in my opinion, he's the best defender in basketball. That's just my personal opinion.
That's a good take. I like that. I'm gonna steal that from you.
Yeah. So no complaints, earlier than I had him, but like I said, maybe I should reconsider. So sticking with defense here, we're gonna go with somebody I mentioned earlier. I gotta go with Rudy Gobert here.
Ooh.
Yeah. Probably a little bit controversial.
I didn't even put him in my top 30. And I was the one defending him the past couple months.
Somebody, you look at, I mean, the offensive game is obviously not the best. I mean, it's just, in the regular season specifically, it's acceptable. And he's always going to get rebounds because he is tall as crap. I mean, he's huge. And he gets so many offensive rebounds and putbacks. I saw it specifically in that Maverick series. The hack a Gobert strategy started to occur, and he wasn't hitting his free throws, which is a concern as it goes on. He's not on this list because of his offense ability. He's on
at the same time, on that note, in some of those Mavericks, like the one where the Jazz came back, I forgot which game it was specifically, but they were about to be eliminated, but they came back to bring it back to Dallas, I believe. And just like you said, with the undersized Mavericks roster, you really feel that 7 feet, or was he 7 foot, 7'3"? And some of
for
those
the
alley
one.
oops Donovan Mitchell was throwing to him, I'm just like, geez, he is a behemoth. That's part of why I'm so interested to see him next year with Cat.
Yep. But he's on this list because of his defense. I mean, he's the best rim protector in basketball, regardless of whether he gets posterized by Westbrook or not. I could care less. He's the best rim protector in basketball. I think we're really going to see him improve this year when he actually has competent defenders around him. We've been saying that for years with the Jazz. People were trying to blame that Clippers series on him a couple years ago. It's not his fault. He shouldn't be guarding Terrence Mann on the perimeter. That's just
Nope.
team scheme, I think, made him look worse than he is. He's an incredible defender. Obviously he's not the quickest. He's not DeAndre Ayton or Bam Adebayo. He's not the most switchable. He can do that job, and like I said, the rim protection. Teams avoid the paint against the Jazz, and will avoid the paint against the Timberwolves because he's there. And several time Defensive Player of the Year. I mean that the accolades also help. He's durable. I think he's deserving at this point.
I know we're just two dudes doing a podcast, but that just goes to show one reason the Timberwolves probably overpaid so much for Gobert, because the way they looked at it, maybe he's not in their top 30, maybe he's in their top 40, but they're like, okay, we could have three players that are in the top 30 to 40 in the league, which going by our list is what it's looking like. So he's that type of talent, and I can't deny that. He just, like I said, other players I like more, but actually, you kind of convinced me that he would probably be a bit higher on my list if I redid it. But so 28 is gonna be who I had at 22nd, and I know he had a down year. I know we don't like him, but I have to give James Harden a spot here because I honestly do think the hamstring thing was real. Like, he was dealing with a bad thing, and maybe that's a reason to have him lower. Because what if he's still dealing with that this year? But from the looks of it, he seems to be getting in really good shape. And that dynamic he has with Embiid and the pick and roll, the fact that he could play with a big like that for the first time in his career, because I mean, Dwight wasn't doing nothing that Embiid does on the court. He did have some big games in the playoffs, even if he did have some nodding off games. And as much as I hate him sometimes, I still like him, like his play style, like the beard and everything. And yeah, I still think he deserves a spot in the top 30.
Yep, he is not in my top 30.
Woo, buddy.
But he is on the edge. He's on the edge. I just this year was concerning. His physical attributes are also declining, which is a concern. But that being said, he still can score, and he's a great facilitator. It's true. I mean, the defense
passing
is
incredible. D'Antoni like leveled him up to another level whenever they
oh,
joined
for sure.
forces.
For sure. And the argument you're making makes me look at some of the other guys because, I've still got, I think, 5 guys that haven't been picked yet that are in my top 30. So there's an argument that I'm seeing now for over a couple of them. So I don't have any complaints about it. I mean, like I said, we're in the range now. It's very subjective. It's very subjective, personal opinions and stuff. One pick here, and this is my last pick. And I think this is one you'll agree with because I know you love the guy. For me, it's going to be Chris Middleton here.
Ooh, I had him at 26. I like it.
Yeah, well, this is 25. This is my 25th player.
Oh, okay.
I love Chris Middleton.
Me
even
too.
the fact that he torched my Suns in the finals, I still love the guy. I mean, we were talking about pure jump shots earlier with Paul George. Chris Middleton, same kind of guy. Not the most athletic guy, but he still has that jump when he needs it. I mean, he has the step if he needs it as well. He's just such a good shooter, and he's also a very good defender. He's a wing. He's a 3-and-D wing, but he can also get his own shot.
Such a great ball handler for his friggin' size, dude. That's what I always think about. Like, so huge at 6'7", not the flashiest handler, but has such good control over it. Mix that with everything you're talking about.
Really, when you look at it, you talk about he's just not a sexy player, but he is very, very efficient. He gets it done on both ends of the court.
Yep.
Yeah, in my opinion, he's the second best player on the best team of basketball. We talk about Drew Holiday, but I think I'd take Middleton over Drew Holiday personally. It's obviously
Thing,
close.
it's
That's
weird because like it feels like I agree with that, but then I had Drew Holiday ahead of him on the list. But they feel in the same range where it's like, oh, I
yeah.
love having these guys on my team.
But it's one of those I love the guy. If I was starting a basketball team, he'd be hard to keep off my team. Let's put it that
Yep.
way. And
Yep.
it's one of those things he's got to be in my top 30. And so even if I had guys above him, since it's my last pick, I'd have to take him here. But he was my next player available, so it makes too much sense.
And I just love when they won the finals and Giannis is like, I couldn't do this without Chris. Me and Chris go way back. That was just
Yep.
their friendship is so perfect, man. Then obviously he's from Charleston. We some
Yep.
Charleston boys, so um well crap, we're already on the last pick. All right. So we're gonna have to go with who was 23 on my board, and that's Zach Levine. Um I've always been a pretty big Zach Levine fan, but the improvements he's made as a like he's one of the most elite. We were talking about the likes of Donovan Mitchell and Devin Booker. He's such a threat with the ball in his hands. And whenever we talked about the Bulls last year, when people would say DeRozan wouldn't fit with him, and I thought like, no, wait, they're actually a good fit because Levine's such a high flying dunker. He could cut to the basket. DeRozan's a good playmaker, and he was willing to do stuff like that, which gives you bonus points for me. Defense still isn't really there, but he's at least trying now compared to a few years ago.
Mhm. Yep. I don't have any complaints here. He's my 29th player.
Ooh, okay.
So made my top 30 just barely, but he's in there for sure. I mean, we talked about improvements. He's a guy who's improved every year he's been in the league in my
For
book.
real, big time. Like he went from is this guy just a dunk contest winner to wait, this guy's actually one of the most dominant, I'll get you 50 points whenever type of players.
He can shoot. I mean, really, he's the type of guy who can score at all three levels, especially on the inside and 3-point range. He's so athletic. His playmaking isn't necessarily the best, but it's good. I mean, I shouldn't say it's not the best. He is a good playmaker. He's not on the level of other guys. I would say like I'd take Devin Booker's playmaking over him. Obviously, Luka, players like that. It's better than Donovan Mitchell in my book. Actually, I don't know. That's another debate for another time. But
I would give
let's put it this
Mitchell
way:
the
he can play
slight
make.
edge there.
Yeah, he can play make. He's so athletic. I mean, he's just a freak of nature, and he can shoot very well. I mean, he can
And
take
he's
over
got
games, like
super
you
red
said.
lips
Yep. And
from all the
also,
cherry drinks.
you mentioned something there about his movement and all that. That's a very underrated thing. Especially people really talk about Steph Curry with it, how much he runs off the ball. Levine is also a very good off-ball offensive threat. So
Yeah, dude. Some of the plays him and DeRozan and Lonzo were running last year it was beautiful to watch. It was so cool to have the Bulls be that good again, and him
yeah,
and DeRozan were a big part of it. So I'm glad they were featured in our top 30. And I'm gonna do that. I'm gonna read out all of our picks now, and then once I'm done reading them, we could say who is left on our top 30 personally, and yeah. So our first round of best players entering the season: Giannis, Jokic, Curry, Luca, KD, Kawhi, Joel Embiid, LeBron James, Jason Tatum, Jimmy Butler. That's 10. Devin Booker, Ja Morant, Damian Lillard, Paul George, Trey Young, Zion, Kyrie, Donovan Mitchell, DeMar DeRozan, Chris Paul. That's 20. Pascal Siakam, Anthony Edwards, Anthony Davis, Cat, Bam Adebayo, Drew Holiday, Rudy Gobert, James Harden, Chris Middleton, and Zach Levine. 30.
I like that list.
That's a pretty good list.
So I guess I'll go first. So all my top 25 are on the list. Number 26 player is not on the list, and this is a guy I love. I've loved him for a while. This is going to be Darius Garland at 26.
Ooh.
27, and this is one I just the way he played in the playoffs against my Suns, I just kind of had to put him here. That's going to be Brandon Ingram.
Mm.
28 going to be Jaylen Brown.
Mm.
And 29 was Levine, and 30 was Towns. So only 3 players of mine didn't end up getting drafted in the top 30.
Only 2 on my list didn't, which were actually the last 2 on my list, 29, 30, which were DeAndre Ayton, and then LaMelo, which I could totally.
I was so tempted to put him on the list just because of you, but I was like, I
no,
just couldn't.
I could definitely like see an argument for some of the names after, like you mentioned, Ingram, Jaylen Brown. But just the flashiness of LaMelo, and he's my boy, so I had to have him in the first round at least.
Blame me for that.
Well, that was fun. Like that was pretty fun. I wasn't expecting it to be that fun, but we did it. We made our list. Any final thoughts, Patrick?
Yeah, it was really fun. Something I think we should probably do every year. Because
Yeah,
this can be a fluid. Yeah, you're gonna see a lot of the same names, but they're especially those last like 10 picks. I think it's very fluid based on the year before and stuff like that. And also, you never know, maybe add on a couple extra picks every year. We might have to see about that. So
yeah, and maybe do a mid-season checkup on the list or something like that.
yeah, that's a good idea. Very good idea.
Well, cool. All right, it was fun, dude. Good to talk to you again. New podcast name because some people are evil humans, but yeah. All right.
Still love Mikhail.
Ah.